When you use this tool, you will no longer need to worry about making stupid little mistakes or forgetting little small details in the game that really screw you. So basically, here's what I did, guys. I made a checklist for Warhammer 40,000. I personally am not a checklist person, but one of the things that I learned from my professional teaching career, where I teach postgraduate neurology, I would figure out that most people, or a plurality of people at least, would be making, they learn better linearly. So if I can give them step 1, step 2, step 3, it would actually help them absorb information and implement the information better. So I went to work in 40k, and now I have put together a checklist for you for all of the individual phases. We've got a pre-game checklist, we've got a deployment phase checklist, we've got a command phase checklist, a movement phase, a shooting phase, a charge phase, and a fight phase checklist. And these are all the things that you need to ask yourself at the start of the phase to make sure that you accomplish the goals that you are looking out to accomplish. Now, I promise you, basically every single successful player out there does this. They might not do it intentionally. They might not recognize, oh, I'm going to do step 1, step 2, step 3, but they will run through all the options that they have at the beginning of every single turn, and they might just have a brain that allows them to just get the information out there, and they don't necessarily need to ask themselves the questions. Now, if you're newer to 40k, or if you're struggling to break through the threshold to the next level of your gameplay, I highly recommend that you actually use these checklists I'm going to present here in this video. And today we're going to specifically be doing the pre-game checklist and your deployment phase checklist. And in the next few videos, this is going to be a 3-video series. I'll be doing your command phase, your movement phase, and your shooting phase, and then I'll do the charge phase and fight phase. And I'm going to release all of them in the next 3 days. So today is this one. Then tomorrow I will be doing your movement and your shooting phase, I think command phase as well. And then I will also be doing the charge phase and the fight phase on Sunday. So we'll get them all these videos out to you. So make sure you watch these in a series. And trust me, this is going to really, really help you as you are moving through the table. All right, so let's get into it. Pre-knowledge. There are a few things that you need to just have to know, and this is really on you. Now, I understand sometimes we are at a tournament and we are about to play a detachment or an army we've never played before. In that case, you'll have to include these questions inside your pre-game checklist, which is the next slide that I'm going to give you. But basically, the responsibility is on you to know your opponent's army rule, their detachment rule, and their stratagems. You just kind of got to know that, and you really need to know your own. But like I said, sometimes we're at a tournament, you won't have opportunities to really review this stuff too much. So if you have to, you can ask these questions in the pregame checklist as well. But I highly recommend you just familiarize yourself at least minimum with the army rules of all the armies you're expecting to be playing. All right, now here is the actual pregame checklist. And I'm going to kind of tell you exactly why the checklist is the way it is. So the first thing that you're going to ask, you got 12 of them that you're going to ask every single opponent before you start deployment. What I tend to do is I answer all of these questions for my opponent in my pregame review, where I just tell them what my army is, what my army does. I don't expect my opponents to extend the same courtesy, and it's not because I expect my opponents to be jerks. They're not. Most people I play are extremely lovely people. They just haven't thought to give a good, elaborate rundown to help ensure that both people have full knowledge of the game. Because remember, in Warhammer 40,000, I fully prefer to play it as in I never want to hide any information from my opponent. It is a full information game where I want my opponent to have 100% knowledge of what my army can do, but I will hide my strategies and my intents on the table. Or I won't hide my intents, but I will absolutely hide my strategies on my table. I will be trying to set traps for my opponent, but I will never withhold knowledge. All right, so this is what you're going to do to make sure that you have the most successful game of Warhammer 40,000 that you possibly can. Number one, you got to ask the question, how many points for assassinate? Bring it down, because this will let you know if this happens to be, is this the matchup where I need to take kill secondaries? Sometimes you actually do. Then you need to ask yourself, you ask your opponent, do you have access to advance and shoot, charge and fall back, shoot, charge, and any mixture of those things? Do you have access to advancing and shooting? Can you fall back and charge? All these things, right? Do you have freedom of movement, essentially? And then your opponent will tell you, yeah, I have that on unit X, unit Y, whatever. Now, if your opponent just looks at you and says, yes, I have access to those things, roll your eyes, look at them, and be like, okay, come on, man. Just go ahead and establish what you're looking to do. Establish the way the game is going to run. Let them know that you're going to be very forthcoming with the information. You just appreciate it if they did it as well. Now, I pretty much can guarantee you, basically no one's going to do this. You might find the one guy who's going to be annoying as heck about it. And if you do, all right, well then what you do is you just got to be a little more specific. What units have advance and charge, blah, blah, blah. But like I said, I've literally never had to do that at a tournament, so I seriously doubt you ever will as well. Question number 3, do you have free CP access? This is really, really important because if your opponent has free CP access, then you're going to be able to know what they can accomplish turn 1 and what they can't accomplish turn 1. So for example, if you're playing against Space Marines and they have Mornius Calgar, or they've got Azrael, or the characters that can start, that generates them a bonus CP, you know they can use stratagem combinations that you might really not want them to use. So let's take Gladius Space Marines and they're running Mornius Calgar. Well, they will be able to put 1 unit in Devastator Doctrine, and they will be able to also give them Storm of Fire to give them +1 AP and ignore cover, because they have 2 CP. This is actually really important to understand so that you can account for what your opponent is going to do on the table if they happen to go turn 1 or if you happen to go turn 1. Then you ask your opponent the question number 4. Can you affect my command points? Do they have access to like a Calidus or a Swarm Lord who has the Vect aura that can make your command points cost more? What is your melee threat range turn 1? So some armies happen to have really, really fast melee. World Eaters, for example, they have the ability to move their units 21 or 22 inches turn 1 and then still charge. You have to know this, and if you don't know this, you could be totally screwed. So if it's your first time playing World Eaters, wouldn't you love to ask the question, hey, what is your melee threat range? And your opponent says, oh, I can go 22 inches in charge. It's important to understand that, right? So I always ask that question. Then I look at my opponent. I say, what is your general shooting threat range? And your opponent goes, oh, basically my range on everything is 24 inches. I move 6 inches. The tanks obviously move 10 inches. I've got 48 inches on the one Lancer or the one Predator who has the last cannons. Perfect. Now you understand. The way I answer this, especially if I'm playing my orcs, I will let them know. It's like, well, my tank busters, their rocket launchers shoot 24 inches, but don't forget, I have a truck. It can move 12 inches. I can disembark 3 inches, and then I have a 24-inch range. So I effectively have like a 39-inch threat range with that unit. It's really important that I give this detail to my opponent so that they can make a correct, educated game plan for themselves. Because once the game starts, I'm gonna try to beat them, but I want to make sure that they have all the knowledge they possibly can. And I tend to do the exact same things with my opponents. I want to make sure that I have the best knowledge that I possibly can as well. So I ask these questions. Then I ask my opponent, do you have access to scouts, infiltrate, redeploys? You know, if your opponent says, yes, I have infiltrators, well, what that tells you is that you probably, if you happen to be able to deploy first, you're going to want to put your infiltrators down first so that your opponent doesn't get to put infiltrators down first and then block where you're allowed to put your infiltrators. Because remember, you still have to deploy 9 inches outside of infiltration units. And when I use the word infiltrators here, I'm referring to any unit that has the infiltration keyword, not simply infiltrators from Space Marines. So you always want to drop your infiltrators first if both opponents have infiltrators. If your opponent does not have infiltrators, I tend to save my infiltrator units for last so that I can counter their deployment. Then you go, do you have access to reactive moves? Very important to understand, right? Yes, whenever you shoot my Thunderwolf cavalry, I get to move d6 inches and I can end within engagement range. Pretty dang important to understand, especially if you're trying to set up for like a charge and you happen to be standing 3 inches away from them because you want to make it a good charge and you shoot the wolves. Well, now they're going to reactive move into you. You don't get to charge and they get to fight first effectively. So these things are very, very important to understand. Same thing with Khorne Berserkers or with certain dreadnoughts. There's lots of reactive moves in this game, and it's super important that you understand because that will change the way you have to play the general game. Then you go, do you have access to fights first and fights on death? Very simple, but very important questions for you to understand. So if your opponent goes, yeah, I've got a Judiciary leading these Blade Guard veterans, well, I'm probably not going to charge my orcs into that unit of Blade Guard veterans. It's probably not going to happen because they're going to kill me, and that would feel very, very bad. Then I go, what are your big Overwatch threats? And they go, well, like this tank has like 12 different flamers on it. Pretty important to know. Do you have resurrection mechanics? Resurrection mechanics being like, oh yeah, well at the start of my command phase, I can actually resurrect D3 or what is it, D3 plus D3 or D3 plus 3 models out of my Neophyte hybrid squad so I can steal your objectives. You have to know this because sometimes you're actually going to be better off not killing some of those units because otherwise they'll be able to resurrect onto an objective and steal the objective and score it. And then the last question I always ask, and I know this is a long list, but trust me, it really doesn't take that long. The last question I always ask, I go, is there anything else you would want to know if it was your first time playing against your army? And the reason why I phrase it this way is because there are some mechanics in the game that if you read the rules very clear, it'll clearly work, but you will never put 2 and 2 together. For example, Index Grey Knights, they have a they have a stratagem called the Mist of Deimos. And the Mist of Deimos means that if your opponent ends a movement within 9 inches of them, they can pick the unit back up into reserve. Well, logic dictates that if you know the rules perfectly, of course they will also be able to rapid ingress that same unit down in the same turn. Because that's the way it works. That unit goes back into reserves at the end of your opponent's movement phase, reinforcements, then you can rapid ingress down. That's really freaking important that you understand that interaction, because if you don't understand that he can do both in the same turn, then you're probably just going to lose the game automatically. This absolutely happened to me the first time I played Grey Knights. And the Grey Knight player probably isn't trying to hide anything from you. This is just their army. It's natural to them. They might forget that it's not a interaction other people see. So I highly recommend that you always ask this question. And then I personally always tell my opponent the weird interactions that I might have, right? So I might tell them the strange combo where I can stack stratagems just so they understand how tough a unit can be to kill, or how easily I can kill one of their units, just because I want them to have the full knowledge of the game. So this pregame checklist realistically takes approximately 1 minute to really get through. And once you get to know your opponent's armies and you know the game a little bit better, it takes a lot less time than that. So I know it looks like it takes a long time, seeing as what it took me to explain it to you, but teaching a theory is honestly just takes longer than implementing the theory. So get this down, write it down. It's going to be good. I got one more deployment checklist for you today, and then we'll get into the next ones tomorrow. So this is the deployment checklist. What I want you to guarantee you do every single time you deploy, I want you to pre-measure your opponent's movement and range to determine all of your shooting angles, right? So when you're deployed, you've already done your pre-measurements, you've already seen where his tanks can move, and you've already seen what angles they can draw, so you know that you're 100% safe. Or if you're exposed, you know that you're exposed, and you're exposed intentionally. You never want your unit to be exposed unintentionally. So you just always pre-measure where they can move, where they can shoot. When your opponent drops a unit down, be like, okay, cool. Now that that is there, I can check where your movement is. I can check to see where you can get to turn 1. Very, very important. Number 2, which objectives are easy to defend? You know, how far is it from you, from your deployment zone to the objective? Is terrain in the way? And where can you set up traps? There are certain missions and maps in this game, which I think I need to start doing just more series on some of the deployments, because I just see that people are really lagging behind there. But I think I'm going to do that in a different type of format. But there are going to be some missions and some maps in this game. Like, I'll give you an example. I think it's GW, oh geez, what was it? Maybe GW, oh no, that's a WTC map is what I'm thinking about. There's a WTC map where the only safe place to stand is actually on your opponent's natural expansion, not on your natural expansion. I think it's Hammer and Anvil number 6, if memory serves. But this will show up in different maps where you'll have weird places that are actually, this is where you want to stand. On GW8, when you're playing Crucible of Battle, at the bottom of the map, there will be a place where you can stand that looks like you're out in the middle of nowhere, but you're actually invisible because of the way that terrain is laid around you. So you need to know these things. Then the number 3 question that you want to ask yourself, you need to know what needs to go into reserves. And to really flesh out this answer, you should check out my video I posted a few days ago on everything you need to know about putting things in reserves and using reserves. Number 4 question, sticky objectives. Do you have access to units that can sticky objectives if they control them in the command phase? If you do, you want to make sure that they're starting on your home field objective so you can sticky at turn 1. Really important. Do you have access to a unit that has scout and sticky? So for example, something that a lot of people forget with like Zodgrots is Zodgrots, they have a 9-inch scout move, which means if they're deployed on the line, in a lot of maps, they can actually scout forward 9 inches and start the game in the movement phase, because their sticky applies at the start of the movement phase. And they, or I'm sorry, not sticky, but their ability to give you command points applies at the beginning of the movement phase. And that means that they could give you a roll for an extra command point. Now, it's not the same thing as sticky, but it goes along the same general standpoint. So you want to ask yourself, when do your command phase abilities, your movement phase abilities activate? And can you combine that with your scouts and your infiltrates and stuff to do these cool things? Then number 5, you want to always make sure that you place your scoring units in position to score on turn 1. Listen, I always am in position to be able to score any secondary that is under my control to score turn 1. So Ares Denial, Establish Locus, Secure No Means Land, Containment, Recover Assets, Sabotage, Extend Battle Lines, Cleanse, any single one of these that you can can draw, even engage, for example. These are all under your control to be deployed in such a way that you can actually score them turn one. There are a few secondaries that you have no control over. You have no control over whether or not your opponent has exposed a character for assassinate. You have no control over whether or not your opponent has a unit on an objective that you can kill for overwhelming force turn one. But you can deploy in such a way that any of the cards you can draw, you can score. And this is one of the biggest things that I teach in my deployment videos and my deployment coaching classes that I host. So guys, these are your deployment checklist and your pregame checklist. They seem like a ton, and honestly, it is a lot, simply because Warhammer 40,000 is a complicated game. But if you just go ahead and write these down on a piece of paper and just read through them, I promise you're going to make so many fewer mistakes. You're going to play so much more intelligently, and you're going to have a much better game, and you're not going to be surprised by any gotchas. So start with this. Come back tomorrow. I'm going to go through the movement phase and the shooting phase and the command phase. And then on Sunday, I'll be back as well, and I'll be going through your charge phase and your fight phase. If you like this content, like, share, subscribe with your friends, share with your friends, and you can subscribe with your friends too. And make sure you check out the Happy Grumping Discord, where you can support me as a member here on YouTube, or you can support me on Coffee. And if you want more personalized attention, you can book coaching calls in Coffee as well. And the link for that is down below in the description. Until next time, I am out of here. Happy Crumping. Bye-bye.